I grew up believing that disrespect was just a normal part of family life. The cold stares and harsh words from my father became something I had to accept daily. The scars I carry inside me weren't caused by material lack, but by cruel words and threatening glances from my father. The feeling of being unloved, always under control, made me feel like I was just a tool to serve someone else's power and will. I no longer felt like a child who was loved and protected. The cold glances, the harsh words, had deeply embedded themselves in my mind, making me feel like I was never good enough. The family I loved most was the source of this pain. But now, I understand that I have the right to not endure this anymore. My mother had made a small mistake. She burned my sandwich. It wasn't a big mistake. But to my father, it was an unforgivable crime. Love and respect are things I deserve, not conditional. I decided that from now on, I would live my own life, not for others' expectations, but for myself. Love in my family only existed when I did things right. When I followed orders and never made mistakes, I'll fix it. But I knew from that moment on, I had become the little spy in my family. I've learned that whether family or not, no one has the right to hurt you. I would try to remain silent, reminding myself not to forget my role, not to forget my duty. But I couldn't shake the guilt and anxiety in my chest. My mother was the one I loved most in the world, but the fear of my father made me feel like a stranger in my own family. I didn't want to do it, but my father taught me that silence in the face of a mistake meant complicity. My mother was no longer the mother I once loved, and my father was no longer the father I once respected. I don't need to live under someone's control. I'm allowed to live a life of love and respect, free from judgment or manipulation. I have learned that I deserve better than this. And with that knowledge, I began to build a future for myself, free from the past, ready to love myself again. I was left as a lonely child, lost in contradictions that I couldn't resolve. She didn't dare argue with my father, didn't dare say anything when he scolded her. I couldn't live without obeying his demands, but I couldn't stand seeing my mother endure this. She was the only person who loved me unconditionally, but my father was the one I had to fear and obey. I didn't know what to do to balance love and fear. Every time my father yelled at my mother, I felt like a traitor, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. And me, just a 5-year-old child, had to bear this responsibility. I became a spy, always listening and memorizing everything my mother said or did. Whenever she made a mistake, I had to report it to my father, even though I knew deep inside that it was wrong. I didn't dare defy him, didn't dare speak out, because if I didn't follow his commands, I'd face serious consequences. I had learned that every mistake, no matter how tiny, could anger my father, and no one in my family could escape his judgment. The feeling of fearing my father, but being unable to do anything but obey him. The feeling of helplessness, because I couldn't protect my mother from his coldness and cruelty. Love and respect are everyone's right, and I decided to claim that right for myself. His footsteps echoed through the empty house, each step building tension in the air as though a storm was about to break. She didn't dare face my father, didn't dare apologize, because with him, there was no room for mistakes. I could only stand there, watching my mother with a look of deep sympathy. She didn't say anything, just quietly looked at my father. She didn't have the strength to fight back. But I couldn't take it anymore. His words made me feel guilty for my mother. It was like a heavy burden weighing down my small shoulders. He was unforgiving, especially when it came to my mother's errors. There were frequent arguments, but this time, he seemed truly furious. His words were like sharp arrows, each one piercing my heart, full of sarcasm and threats. His presence was powerful enough to freeze the room. My father, a man who could silence an entire room with just a glance, taught me that if I didn't report every mistake my mother made, I would face the consequences. They weren't concerned about my health, only about whether I had insurance or if I had left anything for them. I heard it all. I needed to change. From now on, I would not allow myself to be anyone's tool. I didn't have to live for my family's expectations. I only needed to live for myself. These invisible wounds had haunted me for too long. It was time to step out of the darkness and seek a new path of freedom and self-love. That's when I realized I was no longer a member of this family. I was just an object for them to exploit. The betrayal I felt made it impossible to continue pretending. I couldn't live in this lie any longer, under this control and disrespect. My first memory of this control was when I was 5 years old, when my mother accidentally burned my favorite grilled cheese sandwich. I cried, but my father didn't comfort me. Instead, he taught me that reporting every mistake was the only way to avoid punishment. These words stayed with me throughout my childhood. Not all wounds are visible. One day, after an accident that left me hospitalized, instead of receiving love, I overheard my mother and brother talking coldly. So, I decided I could take no more. Waking up from my coma, I saw everything clearly. I couldn't live in this betrayal anymore. Looking back, I realized that not all wounds are visible. Now I know I can live without fearing cold stares, without living under anyone's control. The first time I realized a child could become a spy in their own family was when I was just 5 years old. As my mother stood by the stove, shaking as she tried to put out the fire and clean the burned crumbs, I saw my father's shadow approaching. My mother quickly turned around, giving a tired smile, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "How could you be so stupid?" His cold voice made me shrink back, not daring to breathe too loudly. That day, after my father left the kitchen, my mother turned to me and whispered, "Don't say anything, okay?" Every time my mother made a mistake, no matter how small, like burning a meal, I had to report it to my father. Each time my mother made a mistake, I would hear my father's footsteps slowly approaching. Many times had I seen my mother sitting quietly, her eyes full of sadness, but unable to speak out. The inner turmoil never stopped. I loved my mother, but I also feared my father. I couldn't forget that feeling. The feeling of loving my mother, but having to hurt her by reporting her mistakes. And so, I continued to live in a family where love was overshadowed by fear. Looking back now, I realize I don't have to live in fear anymore. I hid my journal under the floorboards, where I thought no one would find it. It was the only place where I could pour out my feelings, the thoughts I couldn't share with anyone. I wrote about loneliness, control, and the things I couldn't change. The journal became my only friend, the one place I could share everything without fear of judgment or punishment. He didn't feel the need to discuss or understand me. He simply blamed me for writing things I shouldn't have. Those threats didn't just scare me, they made me feel utterly helpless. Carla remained quiet, still standing there, not daring to protect me. But now I realized that the tearing apart of my life wasn't just about the pages being ripped. It was about the words and actions that stripped me of my freedom. Daniel's threats didn't just cause physical pain, they shattered my spirit. I didn't know how much longer I could endure, but I knew one thing. I couldn't live in this fear forever. Carla couldn't protect me, but I knew if I didn't do something, I would remain trapped in this world. I understood that she feared losing me, feared that if she fought back, I would be kicked out of the house. But I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't continue living in this fear and control. Find a way to protect yourself, and don't let anyone take away your right to live. I couldn't let Carla live in this pain any longer. I couldn't protect Carla, couldn't protect myself. I thought that writing in my journal would help me feel better, but now it had become a nightmare I couldn't escape. She loved me, but she couldn't stand up for me. She had no power to oppose Daniel.
Ow!
I couldn't live in that cruelty anymore.
Oh.
My life couldn't be just about living in fear and pain. One day, I would find a way to stand up, to live freely and stronger, no matter the challenges. I couldn't understand why Daniel pushed me to this point, why he wanted to control everything, even my thoughts. "Nothing but lies and corruption," Daniel said, his voice cold and cruel. His words struck like daggers to my heart. I couldn't understand why he reacted this way, why he wanted to erase everything I had written to release my emotions. I hid it under the floor, hoping it would be a safe place, a spot where no one could invade my thoughts and feelings. But I was wrong. Every night, when everyone was asleep, I sat alone, writing the chaotic thoughts in my small notebook. I wrote about my parents, Daniel's rage, the emotions I couldn't express. It was the only release in a world where I had to live in fear and silence. Each line was a part of me, a hidden emotion locked inside. One day I rushed out of the room and accidentally left the journal behind. I didn't think it would cause serious consequences. Daniel, like a cold wind, walked into the room. He found the journal. It wasn't a deliberate search, but when he saw what I had written, I knew everything had changed. I didn't know what to do in that moment. His rage was like a storm, destroying everything in its path. Carla stood there, silent. She was used to silence, used to not fighting back. I looked at her, and in her eyes I saw pain, but she didn't dare protect me. She was afraid that if she spoke up, Daniel would get even angrier, and I would have to endure even more pain. She couldn't do anything but quietly stand and watch. He didn't need to ask. He immediately knew I had written about him, about the family, and about things I couldn't say out loud. Each page of the journal was torn apart, the words flying across the room like shattered pieces of a dream. The journal wasn't just ripped apart. I was torn apart by Daniel's criticism and anger. Daniel didn't just tear up the journal. He tore apart my heart. When Daniel said that if I did this again, Carla would pay the price, it felt like my entire world was collapsing. I could do nothing but stand there, silently feeling the pain from his threats and cruelty. I wrote in my journal to release my emotions every time I saw Carla silent. I felt more powerless. Thank you for listening to my story. If you are also living in fear or facing situations like mine, don't give up.